Hello, and welcome to the launch of the International Energy Agency's new special report on batteries and secure energy transitions. I'm Jethro Mullen, head of the IEA's communications team. I'm joined today by IEA Executive Director Dr. Fatih Birol, by Laura Kotzi, the IEA's Director of Sustainability, Technology and Outlooks, and by Brent Wanner, the head of the Power Sector Unit and one of the lead authors of the report. So some of you who are following this event may have joined us earlier in the week for the launch of our annual Global EV Outlook, and these two topics, electric vehicles and batteries, are deeply intertwined. At the same time, it's important to bear in mind that batteries aren't just for powering EVs or our smartphones. They also do a lot of other jobs across the energy sector, and our new batteries report is all about this. And I would note that the report is free to download on our website, like virtually all of our reports. So on with the proceedings. During today's webinar, Dr. Birol will make some opening remarks, and then Ms. Kotzi and Mr. Wanner will present the key findings of the report. We'll then take questions from journalists. For the journalists taking part in the press webinar, we invite you to send your questions via the Q&A function in the Zoom. You can do this at any point during the presentation, and we'll also take a 2-minute break right after the presentation for you to enter your questions. And with that, I'll hand over to our Executive Director, Dr. Birol.
Thank you very much, Jethro. Dear colleagues, greetings from International Energy Agency headquarters. Today, we are in front of you with a new report, a special report on batteries. Dear colleagues, at the IEA, we follow more than 500 new technologies. They are all important. They serve a certain purpose for climate, for energy security, innovation, and the others. We look at what is happening with the R&D, how much investment is going on, what is the cost, what are the policies that the governments are supporting across the world. But if I would have a magic wand to choose one of them, and if I had only one opportunity, one chance to choose one of them, bearing in mind our climate change and energy security goals, I would go for batteries. Batteries are extremely important, and according to our analysis that we are going to present to you today, more than half of the global emission cuts in a secure way do rely on batteries. Whether or not we will have a future which is sustainable and secure will critically hinge on whether or not we will see batteries having a significant market share in the global energy system. Both for, as my colleague Mr. Mullen mentioned, both for electric cars, but also electricity generation. So it is the reason I am thankful to my colleagues, Mrs. Laura Kotzi, who is our director, Brent Wanner, one of the lead authors, and all other colleagues contributed to this special report. So when we talk about batteries, the main issue we are facing today is the cost. But when we look at the cost of the batteries within the last decade or so, thanks to the major advancements in the lithium-ion batteries, the cost came down about 90%, a big decline of the cost. And of course, my colleagues will discuss more in detail. We need to see costs further coming down so that they are commercially getting an important market share in the power system and also in the transportation sector. So as a result of the cost of batteries coming down, we see already some good news from a climate perspective, from an energy security perspective in many parts of the world. Just as we have told you the day before yesterday, on Tuesday, when we presented our report on electric vehicles, our numbers show that mainly thanks to the decline in the cost of batteries today, 60% of the electric cars sold in China are cost competitive vis-a-vis the internal combustion engine cars, the traditional cars. And I believe it will be going in the same direction in the other markets and in a maybe more rapid way. When we look at the power sector, the electricity markets, we are also, thanks to the decline, already decline in the cost of batteries, some good news. For example, our analysis show, which I found very impressive, in India, the combination of solar PV and the batteries today are more competitive than building coal-fired power plants. Very good news. Within only 2-3 years of time, latest 2-3 years of time, solar PV and the batteries, this combination will be much more competitive of building new coal plants in China, and again more competitive than building new gas-fired power plants in the United States, given even the very low natural gas prices in the United States. And another good indicator that we are in the right track in terms of batteries is the investors and what they are deciding, what they are doing, what they are planning. And again, a very important information I picked up from our report is that it says over 80% of the new plant electricity capacity in the United States this year is solar paid with batteries. This is the plan, and this is definitely very impressive in a country like the United States. And maybe I finish it here, the power sector. India plans to auction about 50 gigawatts of solar and batteries, which is more than all the approved coal power investment in India over the last decade. So this is, again, a impressive number, shows how the batteries are penetrating the power sector and transportation sector. Now, this is growing very fast, and my colleagues, they look at all the emerging technologies, and they say that this is the fastest growing clean energy technology today, the batteries, across the world. But still, the pace is not fast enough to reach our goals, both in terms of climate change and energy security. And there are some challenges here. I picked up 3 of them. First, costs. Yes, they went down about 90%. Lithium-ion batteries in the last decade, but they still need to go down to be more competitive. Second, something as an energy security organization, the IEA, which we find a risky one, that the current manufacturing of batteries is very much concentrated. So for us, the magic word when it comes to energy issues is diversification. And as such, I am happy to see that the other, some other markets, such as US, Europe, India, are also moving in the right direction to get the supply chains in place as far as the batteries are concerned. And the third one is that an area that the IEA has highlighted 2.5 years ago, brought to the attention of the world, the looming challenge of critical minerals as we go forward in the clean energy direction. This is also a challenge. There's a concentration there too much pressure on critical minerals. So the challenges or the steps it can be taken in order to release that pressure from critical minerals through recycling policies or advancement in the chemistry would be definitely helpful. So we had, maybe I finish by saying that the COP28, we had some good promising results as far as the energy sector transformation is concerned. Some of the demands that the IEA put on the table before the COP saw the light of the day in the outcome documents, such as the tripling of the renewable capacity, doubling of the energy efficiency, and others. So here, again, in order to reach these targets, batteries are critical. The analysis of my colleagues show that in order to reach this tripling of renewables, doubling of the energy efficiency improvements, the global energy storage capacity compared to today must increase by 6 times by 2030, and the 90% of this energy storage is need to come from the batteries. So 6 times increase in the energy storage, mainly batteries. This requires a lot of efforts also from governments. The IEA will be present in several international fora in the next days to come. It is in the G7, G20, and the others. We hope that the G7 countries, G20 countries, and all the countries around the world would understand the critical importance of batteries to reach our climate targets in an energy secure way. So with this, dear colleagues, I wanted to once again thank my colleagues, our director, Mrs. Laura Cozy, Brent, thank you very much. Apostopoulos, thank you very much to all of you for this great job, and looking forward to hear from you some of the key findings. Over to you, Laura.
Thank you very much, Executive Director. So maybe we can start giving you some of the key findings of our first special report on batteries that looks really across the entire battery supply chain and across all the entire energy sector applications of batteries. Let me basically start from the following. We will go a bit back in time, in 2016, where I would say by then the IT revolution of mobile phones and laptops had already touched all of our lives and transformed all of our lives, with one critical element there, that were the small batteries that are powering even today's mobile phones and computers. And back then, in 2016, basically our portable electronic devices, which are sold in billions, were around half of the global battery markets in the global economy. The other half were the nascent electric vehicles industry and the nascent battery storage for the electricity sector industry. Fast forward to today, and what you see is that actually the market size has increased 10 times, which is huge, 40% annual growth year on year. And the very clear lead of this growth is the energy sector in all its aspects. The leader is very clearly the electric vehicles, the cars, the buses, the 2 3-wheelers, and an emerging very strong growth in battery storage for the electricity sector. Going back in time to 2016, 2 of the key battery manufacturers are actually the same leaders that we see today in the battery space for the electricity sector. So why did that happen? Dr. Birol mentioned that already, is innovation, cost decline. We have been experiencing since 2010 really incredible learning, 90% cost reduction for both the key applications we are discussing here, battery storage and EVs, for a combination of things that happen, innovation on chemistries, better performance, higher density, really changed the cost and performance of batteries for mobility and for storage. So these we are really seeing in the markets today. You see in both cases we are seeing incredible growth. For battery storage, last year, in 1 year alone, we have doubled the installed capacity. In 2023, we sold 14 million vehicles, which had an equivalent demand of 800 gigawatt hours of batteries. And the data for Q1 are incredibly encouraging on both sides. The EV we explored on Tuesday, but on the battery storage, the Q1 for 2024 is also indicating a 40% growth year on year. So this growth is here and remaining by the date. So this is the demand, the deployment that we are witnessing. At the same time, what we are seeing is on the supply side, so the manufacturing of these batteries is also increasing very, very fast. Currently, Dr. Birol mentioned this already, we have a situation where the battery manufacturing is concentrated. It's concentrated in China. We looked at all the plants around the world, and this would indicate that on the supply side, we would be, if all these plans come to fruition, we would be on track to supply the batteries needed to meet the COP28 targets, this times 6 that Dr. Birol mentioned. However, not all of those have achieved FIDs, but two things maybe to underline in this space. First of all, over the past couple of years, diversification has really been a key word here. We have seen an incredible new wave of announcement and FIDs actually coming both in the United States, in the European Union, but also Korea, Japan, UK, India are also coming strongly in this space. The Inflation Reduction Act on one hand, the projects of common interest for the European Union really saw a wave of new batteries manufacturing plants being built or being committed. So the situation that we are in today and 2030 would look quite different. By 2030, if all those plans come to fruition, it would be a much more diversified market. And if you look at the US and Europe in particular, by then the domestic production would nearly be sufficient to meet domestic demand. Of course, this is much more complex because the supply chain of batteries is a complex one, from the mineral ores to putting together the battery packs. And you'll see a lot more information coming at the beginning of May in a new report that our technology office is putting forward on tracking clean energy manufacturing. Now, if we look again at investments and what's happening on the investment side, already today we are investing 130 billion for the market size of what we call the battery packs. And even in our scenario where we only take into consideration the current policies, so this would not meet the COP28 target, as Brent Warner will explain in a second, this market size would grow to over 300 billion, more specifically at 330 billion by 2030. And to give you a sense of scale, this is as large as the investment in oil production last year. So batteries are becoming a very central part of our energy system. It's transforming the energy system, but it's really a master key that is unlocking a lot of the energy sectors around the world. Just to give a sense of scale, owning the batteries for electric vehicles today is the master key for the automotive transition, which today is worth 4 trillion globally. At the same time, is a master key for security of electricity. We have seen a number of investment happening from the United States to Australia to Europe, just to come in very quickly to ensure grid stability over the past couple of years, as the battery investment can go in very, very quickly. So is becoming and is already batteries a very critical part of the energy sector and very central for the secure clean energy transition that we are witnessing. If we zoom in on the importance of batteries for the emission abatement, the numbers I thought were quite staggering here. Battery directly would enable, are the key enabler of around 20% of what we need to do to meet the COP28 target and then be on track for our 1.5 degree goals. But they are also the key that unlocks another 40% of emission reduction. So all in all, together, battery unlocks around 60% of the job we need to do to be on track with our climate targets. Now, the key question, Dr. Birol mentioned this earlier, is competitiveness. And I will pass the floor here, the floor to Brent Warner, which together with Apostolos Petropoulos led a very large team here at the IEA that completed this study. Brent.
Thank you, Lara. Absolutely, this question of economics for batteries is really central and a big part of the work and the analysis, but also a fundamental driver of what's been happening recently. And so, as Dr. Birol mentioned and Laura mentioned, the costs have been coming down, and this is changing the picture very much for batteries overall, particularly in battery storage in the power sector and also for electric vehicles. So if we first look at the power sector, we can see here that the costs of batteries and particularly solar PV as well are coming down in major markets. And this is making them already very competitive with new coal-fired power and new gas-fired power. Now here we are actually showing the combination of costs, of technology costs. So battery costs are projected to come down 40% globally by 2030. Solar PV is also projected to come down almost 40% itself. And those help to combine, to put solar PV plus batteries in front of new coal in India already today, and it continues to be more competitive than coal in India. In China in just the next few years, and these are the two largest markets for new coal-fired power, and also in the United States versus gas-fired power. Now in this metric, we're also including the value side of the technologies. This is an important point that each power technology brings different value to the market. And batteries in particular offer value in a number of ways, from when the supply of electricity is provided to the system to best match demand, but also flexibility to be able to handle very short-term, very quick responses to what the system needs, even in a matter of seconds, and also to make sure that we have enough capacity to meet peak demand. These are all critical elements that add to the value when you pair battery storage with solar PV. What that means going forward, when we look at even under today's policy settings, is that over 700 gigawatts of new battery capacity are projected to be added by 2030. To give an idea, that's more than all the new coal, new natural gas-fired capacity, and new oil-fired capacity to 2030, just under today's policy settings. So we are seeing these announcements and this expansion in the market growing very rapidly here. That is very much a good news in terms of the economics, but as Dr. Birol mentioned, we need to go further than that, and particularly to deliver on our COP28 goals that were established in Dubai, in particular the tripling of renewables capacity, which will be very dependent on wind and solar PV increasing, so tripling renewable capacity by 2030, which is included in our net zero scenario. We need, for energy storage at the global level, to increase 6 times to 2030, reaching 1,500 gigawatts of storage capacity, and 90% of that growth going forward being from battery storage. There are a number of reasons for that, one of which we've mentioned the costs, the technology is improving, but also battery storage can be built very quickly. New battery projects at the utility scale can be built in a matter of months, and behind the meter for households and also in energy access applications can be added in a matter of days. And so this is also what drives that growth going forward. This is not just one size of battery storage. We're seeing many, many sizes. So at the utility scale, you can have up to 1 gigawatt of storage, down to households in the kilowatts, down to energy access applications that are measured in watts. So it's a very versatile technology that can be applied in many areas. And these are, of course, battery storage is not the only option. Pumped hydropower has long been the largest source of energy storage in the power system, and there are new technologies coming, including flywheels, compressed air, and thermal storage that are gaining traction. But as we mentioned, 90% of that growth to 2030 would be from battery storage. And that's essential glue holding the power systems together, making them more efficient and making the best use of that growing amount of renewable technology. We also assessed in the report implications if we did not deliver on the battery side, and very clearly we see that there's a risk that it stalls clean energy transitions, in particular in the power sector, that emissions would reach a plateau if we're not able to deliver on storage. As we mentioned that in Tuesday, the launch of the Global EV Outlook spoke a lot about EVs, and here I wanted to highlight a particular point that is also in the report about electric vehicles and the growth there. We've seen almost 14 million electric cars sold in 2023. By 2030, that goes to over 40 million vehicles, and that means that the share of new sales is increasing from about 1 in 5 to nearly 1 in 2 vehicles sold in 2030. And with that, we would see a peak in oil at the global level. Now, of course, that's not the only factor in that peak in oil, but it is really a central point, and one we wanted to highlight here, because if we had the same share of EVs as we have today, if we stayed at 1 in 5 vehicles were EVs, going out to 2035, we would not see a peak in oil, even with progress in other areas, even with restructuring in China's economy. This is really central to the overall peak in oil going forward. But of course, on the other hand, we can go further. We need to go further. And some of those aspects, in particular about the industry needs to bring more affordable EVs to the market, and policymakers need to establish and reinforcing charging infrastructure to enable this share of sales of EVs to go to 2/3 by 2030, almost 60 million units. And with that alone, with no other changes in the energy sector, we would see an earlier peak in oil and a much sharper decline to 2035. And as a final point, the overall point about supply chains is really essential for batteries. It's to make sure that batteries themselves are part of the clean energy transitions in an acceptable way, in a resilient way. So one aspect within that is the critical minerals side. As mentioned, the agency is engaged on this topic very heavily, and we'll also be putting out another special report on critical minerals in mid-May. One of those aspects around batteries is particularly around lithium. Lithium, cobalt, and nickel are the key critical minerals related to batteries. And if we give an idea of how this will evolve, today we use about 180,000 tons of lithium for batteries sold. If we talk about the scaling up that we need to deliver the COP28 goals, this will need to increase, or would increase without any other measures, would more than increase fourfold. And that's a significant challenge potentially, but there are actions that we can take to reduce that growth for new production that we need. 3 actions in particular that we've identified and analyzed in the report are focused on right-sizing the batteries that go into electric vehicles. Many times, and in the future, this is about fitting it to the needs. We have also the expansion in terms of new chemistries and transitions in the technology that will reduce the amount of lithium. This includes shifting to sodium-ion batteries, particularly in power storage. And the third is recycling, which is really a key aspect that also came up very heavily in our high-level workshop that we held in late February on the topic of batteries, that recycling is a key element to 2030 and certainly in the long term that can enable the better use of the critical minerals that are in the batteries today and tomorrow and reduce the amount of new mining we need. Now, in any case, we will need to expand the supply of these minerals, and a diverse and secure supply is really an essential piece of the puzzle here. So when we set back, there are actions for policymakers, there are actions for industry across the sectors and end uses, across the supply chain, and really the entire ecosystem that can help deliver batteries and make sure that they play the role that they're capable of in delivering our goals to 2030, our COP28 goals, and also our longer-term climate ambitions while delivering affordable and secure energy for all consumers. So with that, I would thank you and hand the floor back to Jethro.
Thank you, Brent, very much for the presentation, to Brent, Laura, and to Executive Director. And we now have some time to take questions from journalists. And we invite the journalists in attendance to send your questions through the Q&A function in the Zoom if you haven't done so already. And do please mention your media outlet along with your question. We're just going to take a 2-minute break to give you a chance to enter your questions, and we will be right back. Welcome back. Thank you very much to the journalists for the questions we received so far. We're going to try and get through as many of them as we can in the time we have. The first one comes from Catherine Hours from AFP. She says the report says energy storage capacity should increase 6-fold by 2030, with batteries accounting for 90% of the increase. How confident are you that the world can reach that goal? How about other sources of flexibility for the power system, such as hydrogen, natural gas power plants, biomethane, or demand-side options? And then we also have a question on critical minerals. Does the world have enough critical minerals for the kind of growth you're talking about? What about other battery chemistries? Could they be a solution? So I think the first question we'll put to Brent, the lead author of the report, and then perhaps Laura, our Director of Sustainability, Technology and Outlooks, can take the second. Brent, over to you.
Thank you, Jethro, and thanks very much for the question. I think this is a very important point, that battery storage, which of course is the topic of this report, is one piece of the overall puzzle, and particularly around the flexibility package that we need in the power sector to make sure that it's affordable and secure as we go through clean energy transitions. This is a topic that the agency and our team has been working on in depth, and we have published many pieces of analysis on this, including just last week we published a piece on seasonal flexibility in power systems. And particularly that's because there are many different aspects of the task. So we need to make sure that electricity is secure and reliable at all times, from every minute to every season. And this is where there are many technologies that can fit different applications. So battery storage serves very well these short-term flexibility needs from a couple of minutes to a few hours. And that's really what we focused on here, where that's a driving force for what batteries can do. And that's why they pair so well with solar PV, because solar PV produces a very predictable amount of electricity in a certain pattern, and aligning that with demand is something that batteries can do very, very well. So that's the area for batteries, but that's in a larger picture of flexibility, including from conventional power plants like natural gas, coal-fired power as well. And those assets are there today, and so using them for flexibility is an important part of transitions. And there are also these other energy storage technologies, pumped hydropower, to mention a few, as well as thermal, compressed air. We also need the demand side to be flexible, and that's something that's an increasing part of the system going forward. So we will be looking for many sources to make the best use of all the assets and all the resources we have as we move to a more renewable based system in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Laura, the question on critical minerals.
Yeah, so very clearly, critical minerals are going to be a central part to make the battery story a success. So we are very much focused on the diversification of the critical mineral supply. However, when we looked at what has happened in the battery space over the past decade or so, is really astounding in the sense that very clearly the big family of lithium-ion chemistries that are available out there over time have seen a shift. So at the beginning, we were using not only lithium, the most sold battery was also relying on nickel, manganese, and cobalt. But if we look at last year, for example, 40% of sales for EVs and 80% of sales of batteries for storage were another family that is lithium iron phosphate, not relying on some of the critical minerals. So just to indicate that this is a space where innovation is huge, we are moving now to other types of chemistries that don't rely on lithium. Brent mentioned sodium, but we have also seen very recently that AI is used now to find new chemistries and is compressing the time for new chemistries to come into the market. So we have a big expectation that innovation is going to help on the critical mineral supply. From where we stand today, however, innovation in chemistry itself will not be enough. That's why we have put forward a number of solutions. So chemistries and innovation on chemistry, recycling, incredibly important, as makes countries that don't have the resource a potential resource holder, and right sizing. Brent mentioned it, but let me reiterate that our analysis showed that by 2030, those three strategies combined would be equal to the amount of lithium supply today. So this is a huge amount of resources that is available to policymakers to unlock the critical minerals aspect of the batteries.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, just a couple more questions I think we can squeeze in before we run out of time. One of them is on the challenges. So you say that a 6-fold increase in battery deployment is needed by 2030. What are the main challenges for achieving this? There's also a question on Europe. Are electricity markets in Europe well prepared to expand battery storage? Where do things stand there? And then the COP28 aspect, are batteries aren't mentioned to the same extent as renewables and energy efficiency in the COP28 agreement. Why are you linking them to COP28 so directly? So perhaps our executive director can talk about the challenges, and then Brent and Laura can take the other two questions.
Okay, many thanks for the question, but before that I should tell you that I am happy that my colleagues just informed me more than 20,000 people around the world follow this rather technical issue, batteries. It means it is well understood how critical it is to have a sustainable and secure future, and how critical to have the batteries part of our energy mix. Now, dear colleagues, there are many challenges, of course, to reach this 6-fold increase of energy storage, but 90% comes from the batteries. Maybe I pick up two of them. One of them is the cost. Yes, we say the cost came down about 90% in the last 10 years or so, but still to be competitive without any government support vis-a-vis the other technologies, we need to see the cost coming down, and this needs to happen without jeopardizing the performance of the batteries. So this is one challenge, I would say. The second challenge is, again, at the IEA, we are big supporters of diversification of energy routes, of energy sources, of the trade partners, because you don't put all the eggs in one basket when it comes to energy. So therefore, currently there is a big concentration of the battery manufacturing, and this is an important challenge for countries, for energy security, for competitiveness, and others. So as a second challenge, I would say that Jethro, we need to see manufacturing goes other parts of the world, and there is a more diverse manufacturing picture, which in turn may give a boost to competition. So this, if these two things happen, and the other things that my colleague Mrs. Kozi mentioned, we may reach this 6 times increase by 2030. So we set 3 times for renewables for COP28, 2 times improving of energy efficiency. Now we come up with 6 times increase by 2030 of the energy storage, to ensure that the 3 and 2 work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Birol. Perhaps Brent, you can take the one on European markets.
Sure, thanks, Jethro, and thank you very much for the question. This is a very good point. So I mentioned already in the competitiveness, China, India, and the United States, but also in Europe, batteries are becoming competitive in terms of costs, particularly as a standalone option versus gas peaking power plants. So to provide stability and really to meet peak demand in systems, we're seeing those costs being very competitive and comparable on their own with gas-fired power. So that's creating a big opportunity, but there are some elements, I think, in electricity markets in Europe where some progress can be made, some improvements can be made, but overall the markets are in a good position for battery storage and supporting battery storage. Because 2 key elements that we focus on in the report is that batteries need to have access to markets, and they need to be fully valued for all the many streams of value that they bring to markets. So in terms of access, this is that with the wholesale electricity markets, capacity markets, and ancillary service markets in Europe, these are generally accessible to energy storage, though there can be an improvement that sometimes the various sizes of batteries don't necessarily qualify. So they might be smaller than the product size in those markets. And in terms of valuing them, batteries can respond in a matter of seconds, as I mentioned, but this is not something generally valued directly in electricity markets. And so the accuracy and speed of those responses, which are extremely valuable to electricity systems and stability, should be valued even more. And this would then bolster the economic case for battery storage in Europe among the variety of technologies that we discussed to provide secure and stable electricity systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. And then Laura, the Executive Director, talked a bit about some of the linkages between batteries and COP28. Perhaps you can fill in any gaps that might be there.
No gaps from the Executive Director, but I can maybe go a bit into more details of what we're doing there. We launched, first of all, on Monday, a tracking page together with the UNFCCC. This is tracking every part of the Article 28 of COP28, so tripling of renewables, doubling of energy efficiency, and all the other 8 or 9 points that are elaborated there. Now, since COP28 was agreed, we also started to understand what are the enabling conditions that are needed to reach the COP28 targets, and for us, batteries has been really the critical one. Dr. Birol mentioned we need for the tripling of renewables, we can achieve that especially through deployment of solar and wind, but having those gigawatts, that needs to be translated into electricity and to the grids and to the people, and this is what will really enable the CO2 emissions to go down. So we need to ensure that these gigawatts translate into secure electricity, and this is why we have made this analysis that shows how critical the storage and the battery part is. So this is how the interlinkage is. Just having the tripling of renewables without the enabling condition for the power sector may lead just to renewable deployments and not to CO2 emission and CO2 emission reductions and electricity security. The other aspects mentioned also by Dr. Birol is that batteries are actually, we don't think about it necessarily, but very much linked to the doubling of energy efficiency, because electrification is a very key part of the reaching the doubling of energy efficiency, and therefore is also important to achieve the two key targets of COP28. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. And that's all we have time for. If any journalists have questions that didn't get answered during the Q&A that you'd like to follow up on, please do get in touch with us by reaching out to our press office at press@iea.org, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you very much to Dr. Birol, to Laura, to Brent. Thank you to all the journalists for the questions. Thank you for everyone following this event for your interest in our work. A reminder that the battery special report is available for free on the website, like pretty much all of our reports. And there is also this COP28 tracking page where you can really dive down into the details of the energy outcomes from COP28 and see how the world is faring against that. So do please take a look. And finally, if you haven't had enough of us this week, we do invite you to follow live online tomorrow our global summit on people-centered energy transitions, which will be taking place in Paris. It's going to be some really interesting conversations involving labour leaders from trade unions, government ministers, CEOs, youth representatives, indigenous voices, addressing issues such as clean and just energy transitions, jobs and skills, worker protections, social and economic development, really core issues for clean energy transitions. All of it live streamed, available to follow on our website. So do please join us if you're interested in those issues. And with that, thank you to all and goodbye.